I'm Webb Reed. I was born in February 1933 in Jasper County, Mississippi. There was no city there. The local school was named for my uncle Erasmus, so the community is now known as Raz, shortening of his name. I was, as I say, coming along in a big family, number 11. I had 7 brothers, 4 big sisters. That was one of my best memories, is having 4 big sisters to look after me. When I was born, my sister Debbie was 15 years old, and she took over essentially as a alternate mom for me. I dearly loved that girl. When she went away, left home after high school, didn't go to university, she went to live with my older brother, who was teaching in North Mississippi, and met someone there and wrote home and said that she was getting married and was not coming home. I threw probably the only tantrum of my life. I remember it clearly. But I did not, we lived on a very self-sufficient farm. We had our own livestock. We grew all of our food. And the Depression continued, even though it might have been over in certain parts of the country in, say, 1935. It continued for our area in rural Mississippi for until World War II. We had no cash, and earlier years when he was healthier, my father had cash money by cutting railway ties, those big chunks of wood, logs that were squared off. He squared them manually with a big wide-bladed, broad-blade axe, they called a broad axe. Sold them at 25 cents each to the railway. That was cash. He, in the winter, had a trap line. He did fur trapping, and he taught me to do that later. We caught mink, and a good, fine, dark, extra-large mink would bring $50, $55, which was a month's wages. So we didn't know we were poor. We just didn't have any cash. We had plenty to eat. We had a warm place to sleep, an old rickety house. The house, when I first remember it, had a long front porch with pillars. There was a hallway down the center of that front porch, and there was living rooms, big living rooms with fireplaces on either side. If you continued beyond that, down a covered hallway was open, unheated, but was covered with shelter. The kitchen was separate, and at the end of that long walkway, like a pier, was the kitchen. They kept the kitchen separate because of the fire hazard. It was a wood stove, and subject to, it was a wooden house. So that was the reason originally for that design. Later on, we enclosed that walkway and improved the house. But it was unpainted lumber, had shingle roof at one point, and then it was modernized with a corrugated tin roof. We sold cows periodically. We'd drive them in a pickup truck. My uncle had a truck, and we'd take the young steers to the livestock sales every Saturday in Meridian, Mississippi, about 45 miles away. We sold cotton. Our property, our farm, the soil was not appropriate for growing cotton. The cotton grew tall, and our soil was suitable for soybeans, corn, and that kind of thing, and gardening. It was beautiful, rich soil. We had plenty of woods. We cut our own firewood from our own property. We hunted and went swimming in the creeks and rivers on our own property. So we had everything we needed. We had to have money to buy coffee, flour. We raised our own corn for bread and that. We had to buy salt and sugar. Sugar wasn't always necessary because we raised our own sugar cane. Town was 12 miles away on a dirt road, later a gravel road, 2 lanes. The roads leading we were at least a mile from that highway. So our roadway in front of our house was just a set of ruts, like a little country lane in England. And in bad weather, in rainy weather, which was frequently, was impassable. In fact, one of the neighbors had a car. He lived a little past us, and he always got bogged down in the road in front of our house, so we'd go down with a shovel and push him out of the ditch. But it was entertaining to help people get out of this mud. My father married first my mother's older sister. It gets complicated. Her name was Maggie, and I'll remember her from a painting that we had, a large painting of her about the size of that mirror, and a very elegant outfit with bouffant sleeves and a hat and a pulled up hairdo, like the Victorian style. Beautiful woman. She died with complications of pregnancy after the first two boys, my two oldest brothers. We never even thought of them being half brothers. In fact, one of them, the second one, was probably my best friend out of all of the brothers. Anyway, when Maggie died, my father married the babysitter, who was 14, my mother, Katie James Reed. They started a family when she was 17, and they had actually 10 surviving children. But she went to school with each of the children. She had probably gone to 3rd grade. Her father, Christopher Columbus James, was an irascible, awful man. She didn't like him. He beat his children. He didn't get along with his neighbors. He was, erratic. So she was quite happy to be away, and they sharecropped. He moved from farm to farm because he could never get along with his neighbors. But she was my mother, but still, she was known in the whole community as Miss Katie. It was a respectful term. She would help anyone, but don't mess with her. And she traveled later. She only lived to be 70. She was hypertensive. I don't know how my parents handled this. They lost one child to colitis. It's a disease that small children get now when they go into hospital and have IVs and survive. My grandson Wesley had it. Then children didn't, and the doctors at that time prescribed alum, aluminum chloride, which exacerbated the problem. All the intestines just deteriorated. So that young fellow died. Then my brother there was a new baby in our family every 2 years, some sort of family planning. But my brother David died in November when he was 2 years old, of polio. I was born the following February. And I think having that gap between the children was beneficial to me. I got a lot of extra TLC. And then having big sisters, it was fantastic. If I see a young boy now with big sisters, I just tell him how lucky he is. See, there are only 5 of my 12 original family surviving. 3 brothers and 2 sisters. And I'm in phone contact with them nearly every week. My sisters, the oldest sister she taught herself to play piano through a correspondence course, and she became an accomplished pianist. All of her life she played piano. In fact, the day she died, she was entertaining her friends playing piano, had sat down to relax, and had a stroke and died. And I remember her so well because she lived 3 miles away. She was the oldest sister, so her children were my age. So we'd take Sundays, drive by wagon, mule-drawn wagon, up to her house, play all day, 3 miles across creeks and old narrow rickety bridges and that. And on the way back, I don't remember anything because I always went to sleep in the wagon. But then my next sister, Debbie, was the one who's 15 years older than I, who was my, you might say, surrogate mother, babysitter. The next sister, Opal, was very fortunate in that my father could afford to send the oldest two boys to college. And then each of the others, the sisters, did not go to college. They finished high school, and there was no opportunity for them. Absolutely no opportunity for them. And that still rankles me. They were my favorite people, and they had little opportunity for any, but they made good lives for themselves. They married, had big families, and they lived good, long lives. And I can't complain, except that it still annoys me that there was no opportunity for women, my sisters at that time, to have careers. Now, Opal, the third sister, was the beneficiary of what we call the bootstrapping within the family. The older brothers who'd been to college helped her get into college. She went first to community junior college and then on to senior college and ended up teaching English at the university. Dahlia also benefited from an older brother who wasn't wealthy, but he helped her, Burkett, helped her with college, and she became a teacher. During the war, actually in 1943, I was 10 years old. The reason I remember this, and getting the details, is that one of my four brothers, who was in the war, came home from Camp Shelby, Mississippi, from his training before he was deployed overseas to Anzio in Germany and Belgium as a combat engineer. He had been the remaining, had four brothers, three of whom had still been on the farm, who went away during the war to the military. He had been the one who was there, the older one, looking after my younger brother and I, and my oldest sister, Dahlia, who was, they were the youngest three. And he was running the farm. Well, when he left, my father was disabled. He had severe cataracts and was somewhat physically disabled. My mother was, father was 53 years old when I was born, so he was 63 at that time and not in good health. When my last brother left the farm, I was the farmer. And I hadn't realized that until I was talking to him about when he came home before he deployed. My mother arrived home on leave from the military, and my mother sent him over to the remote field, what we called a 5-acre field, where I was plowing a horse, working the farm, because it was a thunderstorm, and she wanted me to get out. I hadn't noticed it. She wanted me to get out of the fields because, danger of lightning. So he escorted me. I put the gear on the horse and galloped him over to the barn. And I remember that because that was 1943, and I was just between 10 and 11 years old, and I was running the farm.